Hello, friends, and thank you for joining us on episode 4 of QuaranTEEN. Today, we are discussing some of the strangest World War II ideas, and there is a lot of them, so buckle up. But first, let's start off today's episode with 1 minute of headlines to update you on the world around us. 1. Reuters, I believe that is how you say it, started off this Monday morning by stating, Navy hospital ship arrives to help New York battle coronavirus. 2. New York Post reported, Cuomo fires back at Trump over claim of stolen coronavirus supplies. 3. Earlier today, The Hill claimed Maryland, Virginia issue stay-at-home order for all residents. World News. 1. Page 6 informed readers that Prince Charles out of isolation after testing positive for coronavirus. 2. NBC News published medical workers in Spain and Italy overloaded as more of them catch coronavirus. 3. The Telegraph discussed how thousands mobbed the New Delhi bus terminal after lockdown announced. Business News. 1. Macy's will furlough the majority of its 125,000 employees, claimed CNN. Sports News. According to ESPN, Tom Brady pitched himself to the Buck Brass, Tampa Bay general manager says. Other news. And finally, MSN informed us that Florida restaurant goer leads $10,000 tip day before layoffs. Now, let's jump into the episode with the explanation of what is going to happen this episode. Alright, so I'm sure you're confused as to why we're starting this off with an explanation, but this episode's going to run a little bit differently because we have our first special guest. She has starred on one of my previous podcasts and is always a wonderful guest. Not to mention, she is the smartest person I know and one of my best friends. Katie, her last name will remain anonymous due to safety concerns, will be joining us today. We are going to begin the podcast by doing yet another pretest and end with a posttest, which Katie wrote both of them because she knows all of it. She knows all about this stuff. So grab your pencil and paper and let's start this crazy episode about World War II ideas with the pretest. Question 1. Why did World War II start? A. Germany invaded Poland. B. Germany invaded France. C. Pearl Harbor. D. Japan attacked France. So again, that's A. Germany invaded Poland. B. Germany invaded France. C. Pearl Harbor. Or D. Japan attacked France. Question 2. Which of these ideas does not belong? A. The Great Panjandrum Wheel. B. Project Pigeon. C. Project Hyjal. Or D. Operation Mincemeat. Again, that's A. The Great Panjandrum Wheel. B. Project Pigeon. C. Project Hyjal. Or D. Operation Mincemeat. Question 3. What was the intended target of the bat bomb? A. Germany. B. The Atlantic Wall. C. Japan. Or D. France. A. Germany. B. The Atlantic Wall. C. Japan. Or D. France. What was the intended target, this is question 4, of the Great Panjandrum Wheel? A. The Berlin Wall. B. German military bases. C. The Atlantic Wall. Or D. German factories. And that's it for the pretest. Now, let's get on to the episode. And now, presenting the smartest person I know, Katie.
Hi.
Hi, Katie. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Just, hanging at home because quarantine's a thing.
Oh, yes. So, for listeners who don't understand how we're recording, I use this awesome podcast host company, I guess, called Anchor, and they allow you to record with a friend online. So, basically, it's just like a phone call, but it's recording both of us, and it's pretty awesome.
Yep.
So, Katie, explain how you already know all of this strangest World War II ideas.
Okay, so it's strangest World War II ideas. And the weirdest things people came up with because they were desperate. I know this because I'm a huge nerd.
True.
I mean,
Katie is super smart, but she's also a nerd. I mean, and so am I. I mean, I'm making a podcast over my break.
Yeah, for no reason.
But, all right, Katie, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to read you about a bunch of them, and I'm going to try the best I can to describe what they look like, but you can always look them up. Most of them you can find pictures of online. So first things first, we have one of my personal favorites, the Great Panjandrum Wheel. To describe this, it's kind of difficult to describe. So imagine two 10-foot tall wagon wheels. So like probably they're touching the top of your ceiling. And those two wagon wheels are about maybe 10 feet apart with a big drum in the center filled with explosives. And around the edge of both of those rockets are around the edge of both of those wheels are a bunch of rockets. Yeah, it wasn't an amazing idea. So the British were trying to create a device capable of penetrating the 10-foot high, 7-foot thick concrete defenses that made up part of the Atlantic Wall during World War II. It was specified the device should be launched from landing crafts or boats, since it was highly likely the beaches in front of the defenses would basically be a killing ground for anyone attempting to deliver the device. Sub-Lieutenant Neville Shute calculated that over 1,016 kilograms of explosives would be needed in order to create a tank-sized breach in the wall. The delivery method for the quantity of explosives created a problem, and one of the concepts discussed resulted in the construction of the prototype Great Panjandrum. The proposed device was composed of two wooden wheels 10 foot in diameter with steel treads a foot wide, joined with a central drum full of explosives. It was propelled by a set of cordite rockets, so basically think of model rockets, the engines used for that, except older, more volatile, and bigger, attached to each wheel. The only problem was it did not work. But I know, right? Big surprise. When tested at Westward Ho, Devon, England, which is a popular holiday resort, so keep in mind that this was a top secret military project. From the first test on September 7th, 1943, there was never a successful run. The only near fatalities were a photographer who was nearly crushed when the Panjandrum went off course, and a dog who had to run away from an off-balance wheel. The project was scrapped over safety concerns in 1944. Like, this is a crazy idea to start with. But then imagine you're going on holiday, you're at the beach, you're relaxing, and suddenly, in the distance, you see a bunch of guys in military uniforms, a boat, and this big wheel thing coming straight at you because it went completely off course. And
I don't know. I think that sounds like a fun vacation. You know, you got a little bit of action in there
fun
too.
for the whole family running away from a military project that doesn't work. Okay, so our second thing is Project Hyjal. This is one of the few things I found that I could not find any images of. But so let's talk about that. Project Hyjal was initiated by a request from the Army for a method of dropping heavy equipment and vehicles from aircraft at high speeds in order to minimize drift and damage from anti-aircraft gun batteries. So, big guns, basically. It was further required that the material suffer only minimal or no damage from landing, and once dropped be ready to deploy within minutes. The high-speed falling ruled out parachutes. So the Department of Miscellaneous Weapons Defense, or the DMWD, came up with the idea of loading the whatever they're dropping onto a platform surrounded by cordite rockets.
Oh, yeah, again, cordite rockets.
Yeah, this comes up a lot. The cordite rockets would fire at the last second to decelerate the material quickly into a safe landing. So just imagine you have like a plywood pallet, and then around that there's a bunch of rockets, and on top of that there's a Jeep. That was basically Project Hyjal. Eventually, 2 Jeeps were provided by the United States Navy, and Hyjal trials began. The first test was a failure, as snowfall on the day dampened the rocket fuses, and the rockets didn't fire, and the whole rig crashed to the ground, causing extensive damage to the Jeep. Hyjal underwent a further 2 weeks of work before another test was performed. This time, the rockets fired successfully. Great, right? Just
Yay!
no. But when the smoke cleared, the Jeep was relatively intact, but upside down, with the platform's rockets pointed skyward.
Sounds
The
successful
problem
to
with
me.
this is they could not get any of the rockets to. They could not get the rockets to fire all at the same time. If they all fired at the same time, this could have maybe possibly been plausible. But they've actually tried to redo this in modern times. Look it up. I think they did it on White Rabbit Project. Yeah, it didn't work very well. After many tests by the end of the war, Hyjal still didn't work and was scrapped.
All right, so next one.
Project Pigeon. So just imagine your normal glider bomb. So it looks like a small airplane, except it's a bomb. But instead of a normal, it has pigeons in it.
Extra fun, it adds some pizzazz.
Yeah, It was basically a small glider with wings and tail surfaces, an explosive section in the middle, but with a guidance section in the nose cone. Guidance. The intent was to train pigeons to act as pilots for the device. They'll recognize the target. The guidance system had 3 lenses mounted to the nose of the bomb, which projected an image of the target onto a screen mounted in a small compartment inside the nose cone. This screen was mounted on pivots and fitted with sensors that measured movements. Pigeons were trained by operant conditioning to recognize the target, and they would peck at it, and when they pecked at it and kept it in the middle of the screen, they would get food. So, as long as the target remained in the center of the screen, that means the bomb was heading in the right place. As soon as the bomb went off track, the pigeons would peck, getting the target back in the center of the screen, and the bomb would go back on track. So the pigeons would guide it to the target. Sadly, this meant the pigeons' first mission would also be their last, as they'd be killed in the explosion. The project was canceled in 1944, then revised because, it seems like a great idea, in 1948 as Project Orkan, and then finally canceled in 1953.
So, Katie, tell me, why do you think that they thought that this was a good idea?
Okay.
What was going through their heads? Were they thinking that the pigeons would live through the bomb explosion?
Oh, no, they knew they would die. I mean, everyone knows they would die. The thing was, the Nazis had recently created their first guided missile, and it was completely ruining the Allies' troops and plans and everything. So the Allies were like, oh gosh, we have to make one like that too. And then they were like, pigeons, because that makes sense.
Well, that explains it.
Yeah. So yeah, that totally makes sense. And then our next is the bat bomb. You guessed it. It looks like a normal bomb, right? Except instead of explosives, it carries bats. Yeah. Bat bombs were developed by the United States after the attack on Pearl Harbor. The bomb had a casing with around 1,000 compartments, each containing a hibernating Mexican free-tailed bat. These bats are pretty small, probably about the size of a fist, smaller than that, with a timed incendiary bomb. An incendiary bomb is a bomb designed to start fires where it goes off. Dropped from a plane, the casings would deploy a parachute mid-flight and open to release the bats, which would then disperse and roost in the attics and top floors of buildings in a 20 to 40-mile radius. The incendiary bombs that were on timers would then ignite and start fires in inaccessible places. It was designed for attacks on Japanese cities that were mainly wood and paper construction, so they would burn very well. The bat bomb was suggested to the government by a dental surgeon in Pennsylvania, to which President Roosevelt responded, "This man is not a nut. It sounds like a perfectly wild idea, but is worth looking into." It probably helps that the dental surgeon was friends with the president's wife. During project testing, the Carlsbad Army Airfield Test Range caught fire May 15, 1943, when bats were accidentally released. Despite that, testing went on, and in following tests, the bat bomb seemed like a feasible weapon. But the project was canceled when the fleet admiral heard it would probably not be combat ready until mid-1945. By that time, an estimated $2 million or $31 million today had been spent. Adding to the insanity, the assembled workers for the project included a mammologist, actor Tim Holt, a former gangster, 2 self-described bat lovers, and a former hotel manager.
I think it was under good hands.
Yeah, it had the most professional group of people working on it that you could ever assemble.
All right, so now Katie and I took a quick break to talk about one of our sponsors.
All right, let's be real. You might be listening to this podcast because you want to make a podcast. And you might be wondering, how do I start doing that? And what are the first steps? How does this entire thing work? Well, let me introduce you to something life-changing. Anchor FM. Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. I have been using Anchor I've made 2 podcasts on it, and this is definitely my favorite one to record, and it's fantastic. Honestly, there's everything I need, and I am so happy to have such an amazing free tool that I get to use for everything. So download the free Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. Again, anchor.fm. Get started now.
All right, we're going to hop right back in, and we've got some more crazy ideas coming right up.
So our next crazy idea, this one never got off the drawing board, which is probably good, but it's really funny. So, is the idea to feminize Hitler.
What?
Okay, so British spies were looking at a way of ruining Hitler, and they decided they could give him female hormones. Maybe agents were planning to smuggle doses of estrogen into his food to make him less aggressive and more docile, and see the error in his ways and the crimes he had committed against humanity and all that stuff. Spies working for the British were close enough to Hitler to have access to his food, said Professor Brian Ford, who discovered the plot. Estrogen was chosen because it was tasteless and would have a slow and subtle effect, meaning it would pass Hitler's food tasters unnoticed. Keep in mind that this was back in the 1940s when they thought the chemicals in your body controlled everything. This plan would have been entirely probable. The Allies had many agents that would have had access to Hitler's food and could have added the estrogen. His tasters wouldn't have experienced any effects from the hormones because his taster's role was female, and therefore unlikely to have a reaction. For either good or bad, probably good, the plan never got off the drawing board. But if it did, instead of the desired effect of making Hitler more gentile, with all likelihood he would have gotten more erratic and irritable due to hormone imbalance and the other effects of ingesting female hormones.
Sounds rough.
Yep. Okay, so our next is the Whome, which is a stink bomb. In 1943, the OSS, which was America's espionage agency during the time, wanted to develop a weapon to humiliate Nazi officers in occupied countries like France. And the Whome, also called the SAC-23 or S-Liquid, was born. Whome was a military-grade stink bomb, with a main ingredient of scatol, or the fecal-smelling compound produced by bacteria in the gut to break down meat, and combined with sulfur and ammonia, it smelled terrible. One suggested use of the weapon was for resistance groups to drop capsules of it on known Nazi meeting places where it would be crushed under a foot, releasing the horrible odor. Others included spraying it on them as they walked past on the street, as if they farted. This was intended to embarrass them, a small form of resistance. It smelled terrible as intended. That did work. The containers that it was put in did not work. When Major John Jeffries received the samples, all of the containers were leaking. Furthermore, the quality control testers at Maryland Research Laboratories wrote a report that stated, almost without exception, the operator was contaminated when squirting the contents of the tube. So you might get them, but you would also smell terrible for 2-3 hours. Testing still continued, but sadly the weapon never got to the field because 17 days after the second and final report on the Whome, the United States dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima.
Oof.
Now for our next and final crazy idea. We're back to abusing animal cruelty. We're back to animal cruelty.
Boy.
Yep, anti-tank dogs. Anti-tank dogs were dogs trained to carry explosives to tanks, armored vehicles, and other targets. They were trained by Soviet and Russian military forces between 1930 and 1996 and used 1941 to 1942 against German tanks in World War II. The original dog training routine was to leave the bomb and retreat, so the bomb would get detonated by a timer. But this routine completely failed when the timer went off, or was faulty, and was replaced by an impact detonation which killed the dog in the process. Yay! The U.S. military also trained anti-tank dogs in 1943 for use against fortifications, but never deployed them. When they were deployed, some problems were found. In order to save fuel and ammunition during training, dogs had been trained on tanks which stood still and did not fire their guns. In the field, the dogs refused to dive under moving tanks, and the gunfire from the tanks would scare them away. They would run back to the trenches and often detonated the charges upon jumping in, killing their Soviet handlers. Another training mistake was revealed later. The Soviets used their own diesel engine tanks to train the dogs rather than the German gasoline ones. As the dogs relied on their acute sense of smell, the dogs sought out the familiar Soviet tanks instead of the strange-smelling German ones. This effectively meant the Soviets had trained the dogs to sabotage their own army. Not to mention...
So, we should definitely mention again. This was used between 1930 and 1996.
Yeah. They never worked, though. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
And
why would they keep training it? That's just dumb.
Because they wanted to destroy tanks, and no one had a real good way of destroying them. Another problem about this was the Soviet handlers would often refuse to train with the dogs because they didn't want to see the dogs that they'd trained with for so long being killed. It wasn't good for morale anyway. So,
all right,
I just want to stress here that these ideas were crazy, but people like to forget when we look at World War II that, oh yeah, the Allies won. That exactly how close we were to losing. Around 1942, 1943, everyone thought the Nazis were going to win. There was honestly, everyone thought the Allies were going to lose up until D-Day. So everyone was super desperate. Everyone was running out of supplies. Everyone was freaking out. And they needed all the ideas they could find. So, yeah. These may be insane, but we were desperate. So.
All right, Katie, thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem.
We really appreciate it, and we got all of your awesome knowledge about, feminizing Hitler.
Yeah, I'm very good at random knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
And yet again, thank you so much to Katie, our special guest for this episode. We really couldn't have done it without you. And you're clearly very knowledgeable, and I'm glad that you gave us that word of advice for the grand meaning of this whole thing. Now let's go on to the post-test. Alright, this is the post-test. Question 1. Why did World War II start? A. Germany invaded Poland. B. Germany invaded France. C. Pearl Harbor. Or D. Japan attacked France. Again, that's A. Germany invaded Poland. B. Germany invaded France. C. Pearl Harbor. Or D. Japan attacked France. Question 2. Which of these ideas does not belong? A. The Great Panjandrum Wheel. B. Project Pigeon. C. Project Hyjal. Or D. Operation Mincemeat. A. The Great Panjandrum Wheel. B. Project Pigeon. C. Project Hyjal. Or D. Operation Mincemeat. Question 3. What was the intended target of the bat bomb? A. Germany. B. The Atlantic Wall. C. Japan. Or D. France. A. Germany. B. The Atlantic Wall. C. Japan. Or D. France. What was the intended target, this is question 4, of the Great Panjandrum Wheel? A. The Berlin Wall. B. German military bases. C. The Atlantic Wall. Or D. German factories. A, the Berlin Wall, again, B, military bases, C, the Atlantic Wall, or D, German factories. And that's the end of the post test. Stay tuned if you want to hear the answer key. All right, so here is the actual answers. So question 1, why did World War II start? The correct answer was A, Germany invaded Poland. On the second question, which of these ideas does not belong? The correct answer was D, Operation Mincemeat. Question 3, what was the intended target of the bat bomb? And that is C, Japan. And question 4, what was the intended target of the Great Panjandrum Wheel? The correct answer was also C, the Atlantic Wall. So thanks for doing the pre and post test, and thank you, Katie, for making it. And that's it for today's episode. If you are able to, please email us at QuaranTEEN, spelled QuaranTEEN, .podcast@gmail.com. We want feedback on your test results. Also, we would be interested in hearing any requests for future episodes because we're running out of ideas. Be sure to join us Wednesday as we discuss the taste of food with special guest Grace. Also, I know that we had the benefits of yoga and meditation was our next planned episode. I'm planning on pushing that to Friday unless we have anything else going on that we need to do it any other day, but it'll happen eventually. Okay, now go follow us on our socials at quaran.teen.pod, yes, we changed it, on Instagram, and at QuaranTEENP on Twitter, capital P and Q, to get the newest information. If you have any questions, you can send us voice messages on our website, which is also linked in the description. And we just joined Facebook. All you have to do to find us is search Quaran-Teen. Facebook was so picky and wouldn't let us spell it Arbo with all the capital letters. Anywho, you can also subscribe to our mailing list by making an account on our website. And thank you so much for listening and joining us on Wednesday. First and foremost, a special thanks to wonderful special guest Katie. She made my life easier and yours more entertaining. Well, she killed it. A special thanks to Anchor for sponsoring the podcast. And, more specifically this episode, and Wix for the amazing website creation tools. Also, thank you to our many streaming platforms: Anchor, Breaker, Castbox, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Spotify, and Google Play Music. See you next time!